Welcome to Module 1 in the 2022-23 school year Test Security Training Series, Test Integrity and Assessment Overview. OSSE's Office of Assessments has developed a series of training modules to prepare LEA Test Integrity Coordinators, LEA Assessment Managers, LEA Test Coordinators, and non-public school test coordinators for Spring 2023 Statewide Assessment Administration. There are 6 required training modules. These modules are required for all LEA Test Integrity Coordinators, LEA Assessment Managers, LEA Test Coordinators, and non-public school test coordinators, including those responsible for access and alternate access, MSAA, DLM, DC Science, and PARC. The modules follow the order of activities in the assessment coordination timeline. Upon the completion of all training modules, you will need to complete a quiz and certification form verifying that you have viewed all content. A score of 80% or higher out of 120 total points on the quiz will serve as the official attendance and completion of the 2022-23 Test Security Training. In Module 1, we will cover the test integrity and test security policy and the first 4 steps in our assessment coordination timeline. This assessment coordination timeline shows the activities needed in order to complete statewide assessment administration in the District of Columbia. The color and shape of each icon indicates who is performing each action, which is outlined on this slide and discussed in Module 0. Starting in this module, these icons will appear in the top right corner of slides to indicate where in the coordination process those activities occur. You may find it helpful to have this timeline available for reference as you go through each training module. Each training module provides detailed information on the activities in the assessment coordination timeline. In this module, we will cover the steps highlighted in the orange dotted line. Select LEA Test Coordinator and submit to OSSE. Determine test windows and submit to OSSE. Apply for alternate assessments, and attend OSSE assessment trainings. Because you are viewing this OSSE training module, most, if not all of these steps will have already occurred. If you are not sure whether your LEA has completed these steps, please contact the Office of Assessments, osse.assessment@dc.gov as soon as possible for assistance. Before we go into the assessment coordination timeline, I want to center our discussion in test integrity and test security policy. For those who have attended test security training in previous years, you may recognize this statement from OSSE. It is something that we share at the beginning of our trainings, as it is important to remember why we ask for the standardization we do. OSSE's goal is to develop and provide statewide assessments that yield fair and accurate results. To do this, schools and local education agencies are to administer assessments in consistent and standardized conditions. The best way for us to support schools and LEAs in administering quality assessments is to ensure educators understand and recognize acceptable and unacceptable assessment practices. OSSE's goal is to provide clear and robust guidance to LEAs such that students experience as consistent and equitable testing conditions as possible. Let's start with an overview of our test integrity and security policy documents. In the District of Columbia, we are bound by a number of laws, regulations, and compliance documents detailing our test security requirements. These include the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 and the Testing Integrity Act amendments in 2015. Additional compliance documents include the 2022-23 District of Columbia Test Security Guidelines and the Assessment Test Coordinator and Administrator Manuals for each summative assessment. We will go over each of these pieces individually. The 2022-23 Statewide Assessments Participation and Performance Policy details the required assessments for this school year, as well as how participation rates and performance calculations are determined. All public elementary and secondary students, including students with disabilities, English learner students, and EL students with disabilities enrolled in tested grades and courses are required to participate in statewide testing in accordance with this policy. The foundational document that is the root of our requirements is the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 and its two amendments from 2015. The Testing Integrity Act of 2013 provides definitions of key terms and roles, sets requirements for OSSE, LEAs, and schools, and describes prohibited actions set for all authorized personnel. The Testing Integrity Act of 2015 amendments provide updated requirements for the school test plan submission and approval process, set requirements for OSSE training and guidance document release, and provides an updated list of approved electronics during testing in special circumstances. In addition to the guidance presented in the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 as amended, OSSE releases annual policy documents and guidance that further clarifies what's presented in the Act. The first annual piece of guidance are the Test Security Guidelines. The Test Security Guidelines are released annually by OSSE to LEAs and the public, stating minimum requirements for maintaining test security procedures. These guidelines expound on requirements set forth in the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 as amended. For example, they include details on OSSE, LEA, and school roles and responsibilities, test environment requirements, and exceptional circumstances. Additionally, investigative protocols set requirements for the post-test administration inquiry findings and reconciliation process. As a reminder, OSSE has released the Test Security Guidelines for the 2022-23 school year, and those are available in the Test Security section of OSSE's assessment webpage. In addition to the test security guidance that OSSE releases, our test administration vendors also release annual test coordination and administration manuals for LEA and school staff. Assessment manuals are available for all spring 2023 assessments, which include PARC, DC Science, MSAA, DLM, and Access for ELLs and Alternate Access. Assessment manuals provide critical instructions for test coordinators, technology coordinators, and test administrators, and procedures and protocols to complete before, during, and after administration. All of the documents mentioned in this module, as well as all other test security documents, can be found on our Test Security and Incident Report webpage. The link is listed here. You can search OSSE Test Security in most search engines and it will also bring up this web page. Please use this web page as a first step to inquire about any test security information or documentation. We regularly update this page with any new documentation or policy throughout the year. The 2022-23 Statewide Assessments Participation and Performance Policy can also be accessed through the Test Security page. This document details the required assessments, how participation and performance are calculated, and final business rules for the District of Columbia's administration of statewide assessments during the 2022-23 school year. In addition to our test security webpage, the Test Coordinator Resources webpage contains a number of helpful resources including the assessment windows, an overview of assessment roles and responsibilities, training schedule, contact information for administration support, and more. There are a number of formal roles established in the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 as amended. Each of those roles have unique responsibilities to ensure test administration is secure and consistent. Specifically, formal assessment roles include State Education Agency, OSSE, Test Integrity Coordinator, LEA Assessment Manager and or LEA Test Coordinator, Test Monitor, School Test Coordinator, Test Administrator, Test Proctor, Special Populations Coordinator, and Technology Coordinator. Now that we have discussed our policy, we can go over the different authorized personnel during test administration, as well as your role as the LEA Test Integrity Coordinator, LEA Assessment Manager, LEA Test Coordinator, and or non-public school test coordinator. We will speak about each of the roles mentioned in the previous slide individually in a moment. But first, we'll talk about the general term of authorized personnel. Authorized personnel are defined as any individual who has access to statewide assessment materials or are directly involved in the administration of a statewide assessment. That means any person who will be involved in testing. All the individuals we will discuss in the next few slides are considered authorized personnel. These individuals have general requirements as established in the Testing Integrity Act of 2013 as amended. Those requirements include complete test integrity training by OSSE or LEA test coordinators, receipt of the test integrity and security notification statement, report breaches of test security and or integrity, cooperate in both test integrity and security inquiries and investigations, refrain from prohibited actions, and read all applicable directions and guidance. The first role we will discuss is the role you will likely play, which is the Test Integrity Coordinator. In some documentation, you may see the role called the LEA Assessment Manager or LEA Test Coordinator instead of the Test Integrity Coordinator. Just know that they are all the same role. One is just a legal term, Test Integrity Coordinator, while the others are what we use for administration purposes. The Test Integrity Coordinator is defined as the individual designated by the LEA to be responsible for testing integrity and security for the LEA and all the schools or campuses under its purview during the statewide assessment. The LEA can choose up to 3 different individuals to serve as the test integrity coordinator role for their assessments. For example, a larger LEA could have one person as the Park and DC Science Test Integrity Coordinator, a different person as the MSAA and DLM Test Integrity Coordinator, and a third person as the Access and Alternate Access Test Integrity Coordinator. This is not a requirement, so all of these roles can certainly be the same person, but the opportunity is there for LEAs who choose to delegate different test integrity coordinators by assessment program. The LEA assessment manager may serve as the single test integrity coordinator across all assessment programs. For non-public schools, the test integrity coordinator will likely be the non-public school test coordinator. In addition to the requirements for all authorized personnel, the test integrity coordinator is also required to designate, support, and train test monitors, complete test security and integrity training, submit school test plans for each school or campus under the LEA's purview, monitor test administration, report any breach of testing security or deviation from test plans, investigate, document, and report to OSSE any breach or deviation, and sign, collect, and submit testing integrity affidavits. Similarly to the LEA test coordinator, the school test monitor or school test coordinator is responsible for test integrity and security for a school campus site. These individuals may be assigned this role by the LEA test coordinator. Also, like the LEA test coordinator, any school may have up to 3 different personnel designated in this role by assessment. One for Park and DC Science, one for MSAA and DLM, and one for Access and Alternate Access. Specific requirements for school test coordinators include create and submit school test plan to LEA Test Integrity Coordinator, conduct test administration training for all authorized personnel, create and disseminate school test plan, oversee security of all secured materials, support authorized personnel administering the assessment, and sign and submit affidavits to LEA Test Integrity Coordinator post-testing. The next role is the test administrator. An individual identified as the test administrator is responsible for administering the assessment to students. Test administrator requirements include conduct the testing sessions as outlined in the appropriate test administrator manuals, establish the testing climate within the test location, coordinate the distribution and return of testing materials to and from students, ensure that students who require accommodations receive the appropriate accommodations in the test administrator's testing group, and account for and maintain the security of all test materials under their purview. In 2023, in an effort to provide logistical and scheduling flexibility for students, the teacher of record may serve as the test administrator for their students without the need of an additional proctor present. A test proctor is defined as an individual identified by the test monitor to be responsible for assisting the test administrator with test administration and classroom management. The test proctor's primary responsibility is to assist the test administrator with test administration and classroom or session management as needed. Unlike other formal roles, the test proctor does not have a specific set of duties, and their duties may vary greatly based on the needs of the administrator and classroom. Although there is not a formal list of duties, the test proctor is still required to fulfill all requirements for authorized personnel, including being trained, reporting breaches in security or integrity, and participating in any investigations. This individual does not have to be employed by the school or LEA and can be a volunteer. OSSE has stated that parents or family members may serve as the role of proctor in a school but cannot proctor their own students. Throughout this training, you will see these test security reminder slides that synthesize important test security reminders for steps in our timeline. Our first test security reminder involves the test proctor role. Proctors are not required but are recommended for test groups of 15 or more students. Proctors are not required to be in the classroom with the test administrator, even in cases where the test administrator is the teacher of record. Please note that if a proctor is assisting with testing, they must be supervised by a test administrator at all times. The last two authorized personnel roles that we will discuss are the Special Populations Coordinator and the Technology Coordinator. The Special Populations Coordinator assists the test monitor or school test coordinator in identifying and documenting all test accommodations needed for students, trains test administrators to administer accommodations, and monitors testing for the correct and secure implementation of accommodations. The technology coordinator assists the test monitor or school test coordinator in preparing administrator and student devices for secure testing according to vendor directions and troubleshoots any technology problems that may arise. Now we can briefly talk about the OSSE statewide assessments and their respective timelines. This slide shows the assessment windows for each of the OSSE statewide assessments discussed on the previous slide. WADA access for ELLs and alternate access assessment windows run from February 13th through March 24th, 2023. The Spring 23 alternate access field test will also be administered during this window. The NAEP field test assessment window will run from March 20th through April 14th, 2023. As a reminder, selected schools for NAEP have already been notified. MSAA and DLM assessment windows run from March 13th through April 28th, 2023. PARC and DC Science assessment windows for computer-based testing run from April 3rd through May 26, 2023. The paper accommodation window for PARC and DC Science is from April 3rd through May 19, 2023. LEAs are responsible for creating a testing schedule that allows all testing to be completed within the established statewide window for each assessment. This year, the PARC and DC Science window starts 2 weeks before spring break instead of 1 week. LEAs should keep this in mind as they are planning their testing schedules to ensure they can get all their testing in before the close of the paper accommodation window and the close of the computer-based testing window. Additionally, please note the 30-day consecutive window restriction has been removed for the spring 2023 test administration. Schools can test at any point during the published assessment testing window. Please see the DC Statewide Assessment Participation and Performance Policy for details. This slide shows the 2023 assessment windows from the previous slide. If you would like to print this slide, it should be done so in grayscale. It may be helpful to add any LEA or school-specific holidays that are not included in this calendar view. Note, the park window starts 2 weeks before spring break this year instead of 1. LEAs may want to think about ways to ensure they can get all their testing in before the close of the paper-based accommodation window and the close of the computer-based testing window. Next, we will cover 4 pre-planning steps that will have likely occurred before you view these training modules. If your LEA has not completed any of these steps by the time you view this module, please reach out to the OSSE Office of Assessment at osse.assessment@dc.gov as soon as possible so we can assist you. As a reminder, this slide outlines the major steps to prepare for and successfully administer statewide assessments in the District of Columbia. This graphic may be helpful to print so that you can easily reference it throughout the assessment administration season. The first step in our timeline is to select LEA test coordinators and submit that information to OSSE. The LEA Test Integrity Coordinator, which may be one or multiple of the individuals assigned as the LEA Assessment Manager and or LEA Test Coordinator, are responsible for maintaining test integrity and security for the LEA and all of the schools or campuses under its purview during the statewide assessment. We talked about the roles and responsibilities of these individuals in the previous section of this presentation, So please refer back there to refresh your memory on what specific things these individuals are responsible for completing and overseeing. It is very likely that if you are viewing this training, you have already been selected to play the role for at least one of these assessments at your LEA. As a reminder, there can be up to 3 different personnel from your LEA who can play the role of LEA Test Integrity Coordinator, one for Access and Alternate Access, one for MSAA and DLM, and one for Park and DC Science. There do not have to be 3 different individuals. They can all be the same person or any combination up to 3. Access for ELLs and alternate access, MSAA and DLM, and Park and DC Science LEA test coordinator names and contact information must be submitted to OSSE each fall. That information needs to be shared or updated at the link included in this slide. We use the information from this form to assign access to testing platforms, the school test security plan application in QuickBase, and for other record-keeping purposes, so it is really important that OSSE has the most up-to-date information available. Please ensure that this information is accurate and up-to-date throughout the assessment testing windows. The next step in our timeline is to determine your LEA's test windows and submit that information to OSSE. In August 2022, OSSE shared the state test windows for each of our assessments for the 2023 statewide assessment administrations. Those state windows are also covered in this module in the Assessments and Timeline section. School test windows are an essential scheduling tool that serve as the foundation for all assessment planning at your LEA and schools. If there are multiple schools within your LEA, each of those schools' test windows can be the same or different, so long as they fall within OSSE's statewide test windows. The LEA test coordinator, in coordination with their school test coordinator, is responsible for determining the school test windows for each of the schools in their LEA. Some things to consider when selecting test windows. LEAs and schools may test students at any time during the state testing window for that assessment. LEAs will have the flexibility to assess students at any time within the published window for each assessment. However, it is best practice to shorten your school's test window to be as efficient as possible. A shorter test window reduces the burden on instructional and staff time and limits the potential impact on test security. When choosing a test window for the school, it is important to include makeup testing days as well. Once the LEA assessment manager and/or test coordinator, including non-public school test coordinators, have selected test windows for each of the schools within their LEA or non-public school, those test windows need to be communicated to OSSE. The way to communicate those windows is by creating a school test security plan, or STSP, in our QuickBase application for each assessment. The link to the school test plans application will go live in January 2023. It will be provided in the NGA bulletin when available. Access will be provided to all LEA test coordinators and non-public school test coordinators. As a test security reminder, school test windows submitted via the OSSE School Test Security Plan's QuickBase application will be used to calculate when each school's final test security plans are due. School test security plans are due to OSSE no later than 15 business days before the start of the school's test window for each assessment. Additional information about school test security plan submission appears in Module 3 of this series. The next step in our timeline is to apply for alternate assessments. Eligibility for participation in any alternate assessment for the 2022-23 school year begins with LEAs completing the appropriate documentation in SEDS. During the Individualized Education Program Development process, or through an IEP amendment, IEP teams are to carefully review OSSE's participation criteria to identify individual students for whom it may be most appropriate to participate in alternate assessments. Every fall, OSSE reviews student records to determine eligibility for alternate assessment participation for the current school year. The deadline for applying for alternate assessment participation for the 22-23 school year was October 14th. Eligibility appeals may be submitted through December 16th. Final determinations will be communicated on January 9th, 2023. As a reminder, this step would have already been completed in October 2022, with the appeals process wrapping up in December 2022. If you have not completed this process or have any questions, please contact Assad Fulton, Assessment Specialist for Special Populations on the assessment team at assad.fulton@dc.gov. Another test security reminder. All of our statewide assessments, including our alternate assessments, are secure assessments and must adhere to all test security and test integrity requirements. The last step that we will cover in this module is complete OSSE assessment trainings. OSSE hosts many trainings to support LEA and school users with the administration of statewide assessments. To view the complete training schedule, please visit the link listed here. Completion of OSSE test security training is required for LEA coordinators. All LEA assessment managers, LEA test coordinators, and non-public school test coordinators must complete the test security training each year. For 2023, new coordinators must participate in a live training option in person or via webinar. Returning coordinators may attend a live training or complete these asynchronous test security modules and certification quiz. OSSE follows a train-the-trainer model for test security training, meaning OSSE provides a training for LEA level staff, and then the trained LEA level staff must train the school test coordinators. Depending on the needs or decisions from the LEA, the school test coordinator then trains all authorized personnel at the school, or the LEA test coordinator can choose to train the school test coordinator and all of the school level authorized personnel. For test security training, here are the steps that need to occur to ensure everyone who must be trained is trained. All of these steps need to be executed by either the LEA or school test coordinator, depending on whether your LEA chooses to have the school test coordinator train all authorized personnel at the school, or if the LEA test coordinator will train the school test coordinator and all authorized personnel at the school. Test security train the trainer steps. Complete OSSE's test security training. Review test security resources provided by OSSE and assessment vendors. Plan LEA or school level test security and administration training for each assessment your LEA or school administers. Reach out to OSSE and assessment vendors for questions or clarification. Schedule training dates with your staff and include training dates in your school test security plan. Train authorized personnel and share the test security and integrity notification statement with them prior to test administration. The test security and integrity notification statement can be found at the link listed on our test security page. Test security reminder. All LEA assessment managers, LEA test coordinators, and non-public school test coordinators must complete OSSE test security training, review the modules, and achieve a passing score on the quiz. School test security plans will not be approved if the LEA test coordinator or non-public school test coordinator listed in the plan did not complete the test security training and achieve a passing score on the quiz. At the end of these training modules, you will need to complete a certification form, letting OSSE know that you have completed all modules, and we will use that certification as proof of attendance. Here, you can see the dates for access-specific trainings. The full training schedule and links to register for these trainings can be found on the Test Coordinator resource page under the document titled 2022-23 Assessment Training Schedule. These trainings include the Access for ELL's online test administrator training on January 12th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. and Access for ELL's test coordinator training on January 13th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Both trainings will be held virtually by a representative from WIDA, the assessment vendor for Access. If you have any questions about these trainings, please reach out to Assad Fulton at assad.fulton@dc.gov. On this slide are the dates for MSAA and DLM specific trainings. The full training schedule and links to register for these trainings can be found on the Test Coordinator's resource page under the document titled 2022-23 Assessment Training Schedule. MSAA trainings include Test Coordinator or Test Administrator training modules and Test Administration Training webinar held on February 1st from 1 to 2:30 p.m. The training modules will be available in early March on the MSAA online platform under the Modules link. Information on how to register for the February 1st Test Administration webinar will be released through the NGA Bulletin. If you have any questions about the MSAA trainings, please reach out to Assad Fulton at assad.fulton@dc.gov. DLM trainings include Dynamic Learning Maps training for district roles, which is available online at any time through the DLM DC State page. Dynamic Learning Maps Test Coordinator training held on January 12th from 9 to 12 p.m. and Dynamic Learning Maps Test Coordinator Q&A held on February 4th from 11 to 12 p.m. Please note that required DLM Test Administrator training is available through self-paced modules on the DLM training site, training.dynamiclearningmaps.org. Any person assigned as a teacher in the DLM Educator portal will be automatically registered for the training and must complete it and pass a quiz in order to administer DLM assessments in spring 2023. If you have any questions about DLM trainings, please reach out to Chelsea Sharland at chelsea.sharland@dc.gov. On this slide are the dates for Park and DC Science specific trainings. The full training schedule and links to register for these trainings can be found on the Test Coordinator Resources page under the document titled 2022-23 Assessment Training Schedule. Park and DC Science trainings include new LEA Test Coordinator Training, Pearson Access Next 101. Option 1 will be held on December 14th from 1 to 3 p.m. Option 2 will be held on January 10th from 10 to 12 p.m. Accommodations webinar will be held on January 24th from 1 to 3 p.m. SRP&P workshop, option 1, will be held on February 8th from 1 to 3 p.m. or option 2 on February 14th from 10 to 12 p.m. Technology Coordinator Training will be held on February 16th from 1 to 3 p.m. Technical assistance during Park and DC Science testing will be held on March 16th from 1 to 3 p.m. Assessment closeout procedures will be held on May 11th from 10 to 12 p.m. This concludes Module 1, Test Integrity and Assessment Overview. You can now move on to Module 2, Preparing for Administration Part 1. If you have questions about OSSE assessment policies or specific assessment programs, please feel free to use the information on this slide to reach out to the appropriate member of the OSSE assessment team.